wisdom, empowerment.
Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. Hurricane season begins in the Atlantic today, despite having one named storm already taken place last week with Alberto. But how much attention should you pay to watches and warnings? Government forecasters hope you pay much attention. Eben Brown reports from the National Hurricane Center in Miami.
No two tropical cyclones are the same, which is why it's not easy to advise who should be looking out and where and for how long.
It's always that balance between what's scientifically correct and what we can communicate when it comes to the impact.
Ken Graham is the newly appointed director of the National Hurricane Center. He hopes you don't get hung up on the terms that might make you think a storm isn't as bad as a previous one.
Whether it's subtropical or not, the impacts are the same. There was heavy rain, there was flooding. The dangers are still there. So that's where we have to focus. It's not about the name. We have unnamed systems that can produce feet of rain.
At the National Hurricane Center in Miami, Eben Brown, Fox News.
A national defense analyst says China is making good on its promise to become the dominant world power by 2035. Chad Groening has more.
The South China Morning Post reported on Tuesday that China is stepping up its pace in a new nuclear arms race both with the United States and its ally Russia. The China Academy of Engineering Physics released a document that says Chinese scientists are running simulated tests of nuclear weapons at a faster rate than the U.S. Between September 2014 and last December, China carried out around 200 laboratory experiments to simulate the extreme physics of a nuclear blast, while the U.S. carried out only 50 such tests between 2012 and 2017, or about 10 a year. Bob McGinnis is a senior fellow for national security at the Family Research Council and author of the soon-to-be-released book Evil Alliance. He says the major Chinese investment in sophisticated weapons and technologies is a strong indicator of an emerging new China with global and hegemonic ambitions.
And I believe that President Xi made it very clear that by 2035, China will be the leading world economy, will be in a much more powerful position militarily, and that President Trump will only be around for, at best, 7 more years.
And McGinnis says the threat is real.
This is not the old Cold War, and the future is truly at stake because we've squandered opportunities over the last 30, 40 years to prepare for the rise of Beijing. And they've done this over the millennia a number of times.
McGinnis says China has a relatively small nuclear arsenal, but it is growing in sophistication and delivery systems. I'm Chad Groening.
No special treatment for Planned Parenthood. That's what pro-family organizations are telling the U.S. Supreme Court in this story from Chris Woodward.
Amid concerns that Planned Parenthood was illegally selling baby body parts for profit, Louisiana terminated its Medicaid provider agreement with Planned Parenthood of Gulf Coast in 2015. Rather than follow the appeals court procedure that Congress mandates, the Planned Parenthood affiliate and 3 unidentified supporters filed suit in federal court. In a brief filed Thursday on behalf of 27 pro-family organizations, Alliance Defending Freedom explains that Medicaid providers, Planned Parenthood or otherwise, can't use the courts to challenge the removal of those agreements in an attempt to evade the established administrative appeals process that federal law requires. ADF legal counsel Elissa Graves.
Congress has made it very clear that Planned Parenthood has to follow the administrative process to challenge its disqualification from Medicaid, just like everyone else.
Lower court rulings have so far allowed Planned Parenthood to move forward, resulting in the Supreme Court request from ADF. I'm Chris Woodward.
And the jobs numbers are out for May, and they show solid gains. 223,000 jobs were added in May, ticking down the unemployment rate to 3.8%. That's an 18-year low. Edward Lawrence is with the Fox Business Network.
There are some revisions from April. April was 164,000 jobs added. That was revised down to 159,000. But March was revised up from 135,000 to 155,000. So the net revisions is a gain of 15,000 jobs.
American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Who is today's urban woman?
Today's urban woman is about empowering herself, empowering her family to empower our future. We have a wealth of opportunities here in America. There are no excuses. Everyone should be able to empower themselves, educate themselves, and be stewards of our society. Today's urban woman, here to stay, and we're moving forward, never looking backward. I'm Deneen Borelli, and I am today's urban woman.
Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
I have often been asked why it is that I am so optimistic, why it is I'm so positive. And it's from my parents. I had great parents, my mother and my father. I remember my mother was from Huntsville, Alabama, and she told me that in the South there was a chimney maker. He was black, couldn't neither read nor write, but he was the most employed person in the South, black or white, because he could build chimneys that didn't smoke. And she said it wasn't because the white people in the country invited him in for dinner. They needed his skills. Booker T. Washington said, whenever a Negro boy learns to cook, to sew, to practice medicine as well as or better than anybody else, he or she will be rewarded because the world wants the best.
Welcome to Stacy on the Right. Happy Friday to you. I don't know about you guys, but I'm ready for the weekend. I'm ready for this program, ready for all of the things that we're going to get to talk about today. And that includes our wonderful slate of guests. We have Elaine Parker, Chief Communications Officer for Job Creators Network. She's joining us today. And then we're going to have Ericka Anderson, author of Leaving the Cloud. We're going to have her on in hour 2. Right now, I want to continue to listen to Larry Elder so we can unpack what he's talking about here, telling these stories from his grandmother's youth. It's number 2.
My mother told me that when she grew up, there were 2 theaters, a country theater and the downtown theater. The downtown theater had first-run movies. The country theater had second-run movies. They were both owned by white men, 2 different white men. In the downtown theater, you could go if you were black, but you had to sit on the balcony. You couldn't sit downstairs. In the country theater, you could sit anywhere you wanted. Suddenly, and the country theater only had second-run movies. The downtown theater had first-run movies. So kids went to the downtown theater in order to see movies that they would not be able to see for 6 months or a year in the country theater. All of a sudden, the theater owner in the country began getting first-run movies. Guess what happened to the downtown theater and their anti-sitting-at-the-floor policy? They changed it like that. There was no law. There was no picket, there was no march. The guy started losing money. And all of a sudden, it was no longer unacceptable. It was no longer acceptable for blacks to sit in the balcony. The point I'm making, of course, is that invest in yourself. Make yourself of value to the community. And the way you do that is through hard work, self-investment, self-improvement, and education. There's no other route. If there is, I'd have found it.
So who is that? It's Larry Elder. He's an author. He's an attorney. He's from California, lives in California. He's also a radio host. I've been on his program before. Wonderful, wonderful man. In fact, I met him at NRB a couple of years ago. I was telling him all about how I listened to a show and they were new on the air here locally. Excuse me, I've got like something stuck in my throat here, which is, of course, horrible for radio. And so he's one of those people that when you get to meet him for the first time, he's just like he sounds on the radio. He's just a kind of a regular guy, but he's brilliant. And these stories really have something special in them. And that is that people respect hard work. Hard work pays off. And so when you're looking at the problems that we're facing right now, it's something bigger than that. So right now I want to listen to clip 3. I've got to clear my throat.
The
And then we're going to
president's
get back into
pointing
this.
to the hypocrisy in the media, saying that the most horrible things about this president, and nobody addresses it.
Says what she says. Why haven't they apologized to Donald Trump?
Where was Bob Iger's apology to the White House staff for Jamel Hill calling the president and anyone associated with him a white supremacist? To Christians around the world for Joy Behar calling Christianity a mental illness.
Well, whoa. Well, first of all, Joy Behar apologized on the air. She said that about Mike Pence. By the way, Mike Pence's Christianity, she's right.
Yeah.
She's right. Yeah.
So how's this all connected together? Well, you've got the double standard that we're looking at between the treatment of Samantha Bee and anyone else who is on the right who dares to say something politically incorrect or simply wrong. Racism is wrong. The tweet from Roseanne was, in my opinion, pretty racist. But was it enough for her to lose her job? Just the fact that I've said that has had people accusing me of being in the sunken place because they want to find ways to blame white people for the plight of blacks in America. So anytime a white person makes a mistake, because I believe it was a mistake on Roseanne Barr's part, I don't think she's a racist. She's not given a pass, but others have been. Bill Maher is one example. He said he was a house in. It was on the air on HBO. He said that and was immediately given a pass. There were a few lone voices out there who said, oh, you know, he shouldn't have said that. That was racial. But Bill Maher is they actually called him some names, said that he was never a friend of blacks or that he only likes to date black women. A lot of discussion. But in the end, they didn't call for him to lose his job. And there's no danger of him losing his job because he's vulgar and this is a part of his shtick. But it's racial. So why wasn't he fired? And this is what we're talking about here. And so the contrast that I'm trying to paint for you is between what Larry Elder was describing there and sharing stories that his grandmother shared with him. So these are real life, although anecdotal, stories of how change was brought about in areas where clearly there was inequality. Blacks not allowed to go to a theater and sit anywhere they wanted at one theater, and at another theater they were. And when the content became equal and they were able to sit, they were always able to sit wherever they like in the country theater, but they didn't have the same access to movies, you know, in real time. Well, then when this became no longer a factor, so both theaters are able to show whatever movies they like, then all of a sudden it was about dollars, butts in the seats. Literally, it became an issue of ticket sales. And the downtown theater, I'm sure the owner would have loved to have maintained the status quo that he'd already created, but the financial bottom line dictated that he create a situation that was equal, equitable, a situation where it was only about whether or not you could afford to buy a ticket. And so I know that what I usually get is like from Angela Rye. She suggested last night on CNN that I was in the sunken place because I was comparing comments made by Roseanne Barr to those that were made by Samantha Bee. Now, I wasn't comparing them because they were the same. I was comparing them because they were all offensive. One was racially offensive. The other was misogynistic, coming from a woman to another woman. Now, you can argue all you want about the different degradations because she certainly felt like when I was saying that the comments by Joy Behar also rose to the same level of offense, she said, I'm a Christian and they didn't offend me. And I said, I'm a Christian and they did. And millions of Christians around the world, especially here in the United States, were offended by her statement. And then she said, I'm in the sunken place. And that's the only place Angela Rye and others like her have to go with me and other black conservatives. It has to be a personal insult about some sunken place, which if you don't watch Key and Peele, you have no idea what that is. It has to be that because she can't rebut the true argument that I was making, which is a premeditated attack done on your program, which represents not just the program Full Frontal by Samantha Bee, but the network TBS and its parent company, Turner Broadcasting, and its a whole host of other programs and everyone else that works there. Something that was scripted, written by writers, approved by Samantha, rehearsed multiple times, loaded into a teleprompter, read from the prompter, and then edited once the show was done with pre-taping, packaged, produced, placed into their computer files so that they could then load it into their system so that it would play at the designated time with the commercials and B-roll and ads and everything else already laid in. That's hugely different, and we all know it is, than a contemporaneous tweet sent by Roseanne Barr, who apparently has sent out other racially incendiary tweets in the past. So, does it mean that if you think Roseanne Barr's tweet was offensive and you think the statement made by Samantha Bee was offensive, that you're equating the two? No. But it does mean that what I'm saying about it, and what so many others are saying, it's not like I'm a canary in the coal mine here, is that it's the treatment of the offensive statements that counts. Imagine, let's just roll our minds back for a second and remember when President Obama was in office and he had two daughters, still does, Sasha and Malia, and there was a young staffer, I believe she's a congressional staffer, Elizabeth Loughton, I believe it was. I could be getting her last name wrong. So if it wasn't Elizabeth Loughton, don't string me up. I'm going somewhere with this. Elizabeth said something about the girls wearing skirts to, it was either the turkey pardon or some kind of public event. And the girls showed up with their father at this event and they were on camera and they had on these little short skirts. And she said they were inappropriate for the event. Now, I don't know why that rose to the level of being something that was fireable for her, but she was fired. Not only was she fired, but the online mob system that is in effect for anyone who dares step outside of what is considered to be okay and acceptable chased that woman down. They doxed her. They found out where she lived, and her life was destroyed because she commented on the skirt length of the First Lady and President of the United States' daughters. And it was taken, somehow, skirt length also equates to racism. Whether you agree with what she said about their skirts or not, should she have lost her livelihood and really had to start over again from scratch and remake her life because she commented on their skirt length? And this is what I'm talking about. Because I know there's silence here because obviously I'm a radio host. I'm in the studio by myself. So there's no one to answer that question. But there's also that same level of silence from liberals when you bring these things up. Well, that didn't count. That was racial because Sasha and Malia are black and the lady who made the comment is white. No. Racism is not just any time someone says something critical and they are white and the receiver of their criticism is black. If that's the case, then black people as a whole are sacred cows. And we all know, not only do I not want that, but it is not true. This whole discussion is meant to keep us talking about the vileness of Samantha Bee, the ridiculousness of Roseanne's tweet, the horrible double standard that exists. So we're not talking about what you just heard from Larry Elder. He just laid out, if anyone is in this audience listening and you're young, and you're getting ready to start making your way in the world. Maybe you're in high school. Maybe you've graduated. Maybe you're in college. Maybe you're not. Maybe you're working a job and you're feeling like it's a dead end type situation. And deep down, gnawing within you, because you've heard it so much, you think this must somehow be connected to the fact that I'm black. It must somehow be racism. Larry Elder just explained in that story about the chimney guy, the guy who couldn't read and couldn't write. And it's not that they invited him in for dinner, but that he made a chimney that didn't smoke. And so all of our jobs, regardless of what our race is, regardless of the permanent tan or lack of permanent tan, the shape of our eye, the shape of our body, regardless of any of that, our highest aim in life, besides glorifying God and knowing Him, is to find that thing that we were placed here to do, that we can do to the fullest of our ability like no one else can. And when we realize what that is, to do it well, to the best of our ability, working as unto the Lord and not for ourselves or any man. Because when we do that, we create a space for ourselves in the world that racism cannot hold back. Now, never mind that there are so many proofs everywhere we look that blacks are no longer held down by racism in the same ways that we were in the past. But liberals would have you believe that we are. That's why they created the term sunken place. They want us to permanently be placed in a position of servitude and victimhood. But those two brief anecdotes by Larry Elder and so many more real-life stories going on right now, happening right before your very eyes, prove that it is not true. We are not victims. We are conquerors, more than conquerors in Christ Jesus. So, no matter what happens at the Potter's house or any other house, I'm going to proclaim that truth right here because it is true and it sets us free so that we can accomplish all that we set our minds to. So I'm going to go cough some more over the break. We'll be back with our first guest right after these messages. Stay here.
Hi, I'm Will Addison, and we are partnering with the Ministry of Preborn to save babies' lives through ultrasound. Here's how a nurse describes the power of an ultrasound.
Last week, just one example of a mom who came in was very abortion-minded, and when she saw the picture of her baby on ultrasound and heard that beating heart, it was a defining moment that just broke her, and she said, I just can't allow this baby to be killed.
By letting a mother hear her baby's heartbeat and see her baby in the womb, she will choose life 80% of the time.
I cannot tell you how many times a baby's life is saved through ultrasound. It's just an incredible tool.
Underwrite a free ultrasound and help save a baby's life. Go to preborn.com. That's preborn.com. Or dial pound 250 and say keyword baby. All gifts are tax deductible. Your love can save a life.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a legacy moment. When our kids were in elementary school, you could always tell when they had some exciting news to share with you. They would come bursting through the door and announce, guess what happened today? Then they would share the news. Karen and I do that to each other, too. I call her or she calls me anytime we have something exciting to share. Good news was never meant to be kept a secret. It was meant to be shared. I love verse 10 of Psalm 40. Listen to these words. I have not hidden your righteousness within my heart. I have spoken of your faithfulness and your salvation. I have not concealed your loving kindness and your truth from the great congregation. In other words, the psalmist says, whatever happened to me that you did for me, I wanted to share it, and I did share it. Based on this verse, we need to share some things. First, share what God has done in us. He says, I have not hidden thy righteousness within my heart. God delivered me. He saved me. He changed me. He's doing a work in my life, and I want to share that with others. Secondly, we need to share what God wants to do for others, his faithfulness, his salvation. He says, I have spoken of your faithfulness and your salvation. God wants to do that for you too. He wants to show himself faithful in your life. Then we need to share his loving kindness and truth. I want others to know how good God is. He's not a secret. He's not something to be hidden. Here's what I want you to remember today. God's loving kindness and his goodness to us were never meant to be a private matter. We have good news that must be shared. Go ahead. Really, seriously, go ahead and tell somebody.
More information about the ministry of Crawford Loritz can be found online at livingalegacy.org.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back. StacyOnTheRight.com, at Stacy on the Right on Twitter and Instagram. Thank you guys so much for being here today. And for those who caught my CNN appearance last night, for the positive feedback that I received. I don't go on often. I do get requests from them, and sometimes I just say no. But last night I felt like it was important to get the truth about the Samantha Bee incident out there. And so I'm really grateful for people who saw it and gave me positive feedback. You're kind of on it's always a negative, because going on CNN means it'll be me arrayed against the 2 guests or 3 guests or 4 guests plus the host. And that the content, no matter which side I come down on, I become a part of the attack mechanism simply by virtue of the fact that I support Donald Trump. No matter how often I've criticized the president or held his feet to the fire on issues that he made promises on, no matter how many times I've come out and said, this is great that he's done, but I don't like that, you know, it doesn't matter, because the point is I'm in the sunken place. I hate myself. I'm an Uncle Tom. I'm a coon. I'm a tap dancing mammy. All of those things just because I choose not to be a Democrat, because I don't believe in what they believe in. I find the Democratic Party platform to be unbiblical and repugnant, which is why I find it so comical when these, you know, outspoken pro-abortion, pro-illegal immigration, pro-criminal everything Democrats come out with, well, I'm a Christian. Please don't email me about it. I'm done responding to emails about why I think one party platform isn't as good as the other. You can read it for yourself. But suffice it to say, we'll get back into this a little bit more, and we'll definitely take your calls on it. Right now, it's my pleasure to welcome Elaine Parker, Chief Communications Officer for Job Creators Network. Elaine, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Stacey. Happy Friday.
Oh, my goodness. I'm so glad it's Friday, because I love Friday's shows. We usually have callers and we always have great guests. And you are no different in that you're coming on to talk to us about something that was really a great way to wake up and greet the day, which is not just better than expected, but outstanding news on the jobs report.
Absolutely. It certainly gave me a nice start to my day. You cannot be unhappy about 223,000 jobs added and an unemployment rate of 3.8%. We haven't seen a level like that since 2000. So very good news for the economy, for small business, for middle class, for everyone.
So let's unpack that for just a smidge, because I think sometimes when these announcements are made and they're good, people tend to minimize them. And I feel like this morning, since I saw the jobs numbers, I've seen a lot of people attempting to minimize the actual outcome. Like, well, this is still due to President Obama's policies. I don't think so. This is in spite of Donald Trump. Sorry, I don't think so. And the fact that the Black unemployment rate is actually the lowest it's been ever. The gap between white unemployment and Black unemployment has tightened up to such a degree that, I mean, we're talking about 70,000 additional jobs in the Black community alone out of the numbers that were reported.
Yeah, I mean, it's phenomenal. I mean, the low unemployment rate across the board, it's unmistaken. I mean, the numbers don't lie. We were just kind of sputtering along for the last 8 years or so. And since we have seen a pro-growth policies implemented, we have seen nothing but this economy take off. And we hear from our members. We're a small business advocacy organization, so we represent Main Street small businesses, and we seek to amplify their voice, what's affecting their businesses, what's keeping them from growing. And across the board, they tell us that the issues that were hurting them for the last 8 or 9 years was high taxes, overregulation, and a lack of access to capital. And when you look at what this administration has done with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, we were a big part of that in fighting to have small business included in that bill. Initially the bill was looking at individual taxes and corporate tax reform, and we had a seat at the table. And we fought to have that small business tax deduction. So we're very proud that we have been part of adding the third class, really, to our tax system, and that small business now has a seat at the table. But when you look at also the regulatory environment, when the initial promises when this president came in was that it would be one regulation added for every, and they would take away 2. Well, the most undertold story is that for every regulation that has been added, 22 have been rolled back. And that undertold story, when you take away the red tape for small business, it is huge, and we are seeing that now. And then on the access to capital part, just last week, the president signed a partial repeal of the Dodd-Frank Act. And if you recall, Dodd-Frank was a result of our financial collapse in 2008, but it caused hundreds of community banks to disappear.
And so, but what is
about 50% of all small business loans?
So
and
for people who are listening to the show,
is going to just open the capital for small business.
Sure. So for people who are listening to the show and aren't aware of what those small banks represented in the country, can you talk a little bit about how the lack of having those smaller banks available to people has impacted the greater banking scenario for Americans who are looking for good services and things like that in the banking industry?
Well, I mean, that's where small businesses go for their capital when they're looking to expand their business and even make payroll and get short-term loans. They're going to their small community banks. And as a result of the regulatory burdens, the very strict burdens that in fact were necessary during that time period for some of the bigger banks, because of that regulatory burden, they just couldn't survive. And we've seen hundreds of banks go out of business. We used to see hundreds of them open, every year. And now so many have gone out of business. We've only seen a handful open over the last 8 years. And that really dries up the ability for businesses to get capital to do the things they need to do. And when small business, for your listeners, there's 30 million small businesses in this country, and they employ 60 million people. When you think about that, that's almost 100 million people dependent on the success of small business. So when they're generating nearly 70% of all new jobs, we have to look at policies that allow them to get access to capital so that they can grow their business and continuing hiring people. And that helps the middle class directly.
Yeah. So, and then you mentioned Dodd-Frank and how those regulations were necessary back then, but we've just seen the Trump administration roll those back. So what will that landscape look like now without Dodd-Frank regulations? Kind of, I guess, in some opinions that those regulations were in the way and they were impeding growth. What happens now?
Well, the rollback was to help the small community banks, and what they did was reduce they call the Volcker rule, and it basically lowered the exempted banks from those strict regulatory requirements for banks under $250 billion in assets. And by doing that, it freed them to be able to provide the capital, the access to capital to small business. So from that perspective, when you're looking at Main Street small businesses, that is going to open up a lot of capital and a lot of resources for small businesses. And now that they're all getting a tax cut and looking at expanding their businesses and hiring, they're going to need capital to do that. So there's a direct domino effect. In essence, it's been the trifecta of good news for small business between taxes, regulations, and access to capital.
I'm enjoying it. I think, but for the only thing I think I'm waiting for as far as the tax reform, because it was a good first step in my opinion, and so is the rolling back of the Dodd-Frank regulations, is for them to go back and readdress the pass-through employers. So if you're self-employed and you do pass-through taxation, the tax cut didn't help as much there as it could have, in my opinion. And I know it's because it was such a huge segment of the economy that they were not able to come to a place of agreement on it. But I'm hoping that President Trump will revisit that segment and give some relief there as well, as he has done for large businesses with lowering their tax rate down to 21%.
That's a great point, Stacey. And while we don't think it was a perfect bill, we didn't want to let the pursuit of the perfect kill the good. We knew it was very important to get something passed that could help and really give relief to not only small business but middle class across the board. And make no mistake, 5 million people have received bonuses and raises as a result of this. And we are seeing small business invest, and that's what we're hearing from our members. But we would like to see some improvements made to the bill. We'd like to see the individual tax cuts made permanent. As you know, they weren't able to make them permanent for individuals because of the reconciliation process, because it was not a bipartisan bill. We'd like to see the small business pass-through deduction that you mentioned increased. We'd also like to see the income threshold that small businesses can take on that deduction increased. and we'd like to see them eliminate the services industry exclusion. Services covers a lot of different industries, but when you think about it, it covers doctors, dentists. I go to a dentist that has multiple locations, and in each location there's probably 15 employees. So they are large employers, really across the country when you think about just your local dentist.
Yeah, we have the same situation. Since I was at the dentist last, he's opened up 2 other locations still in the metro area so that he can service clients, because he found that people were coming to fewer appointments because they had to battle traffic to try to get there. So he found locations that he could open, and actually opened different offices. And so he spends different afternoons there, but each office has staff for like dental cleanings and things like that. But for him and another dentist that he's partnering with, it gives them the ability to bring their dentist office closer to home for the people who are his clients. And when he told me about it, he was like, well, so we just did this for your convenience. So if you'd like to, if this is closer for you, you can meet us there. These are the days we're there. And as I was driving home, I thought, wow, that's really convenient. And also a great service for him to offer. But it just goes to show you how much more personalization you can get with a small business owner who, in fact, as you mentioned, now that he has 3 locations, he's no longer employing just 15 people. He's getting closer to that threshold of small business to big business where he leaps over 50. And, I fully expect him to have even more locations because he's a great dentist and he does a fantastic job. But that's just one real life story of so many millions of Americans who are doing the same kind of work. And I would just love to see us, number one, as you mentioned, have the tax cuts for individuals be made permanent. And then work on that pass-through tax, because the small businesses who are falling under that are getting a huge burden. It's like it cuts you off at the knees and makes it really difficult to get to that profitability area because the tax burden is so high. So I want to give you the last word on jobs as we close out the interview. What are you expecting? Because I saw an article by a friend of mine that says that because of the tariffs, we're going to actually see a Great Depression coming in the month of October. But others are saying that we've reached full employment or very close to full employment, and interest rates are going to rise. So what do you see in the landscape up ahead?
With regard to the tariffs, I mean, I think our economic reality demonstrates that this administration has done a lot for small business and the economy. The numbers just don't lie. We may not always understand the path taken to get there, but so far in these 18 months or so, the results have been very good. Like we just talked about, the cutting of taxes, slashing of regulations, and going after the heart of Obamacare. We're seeing these economic indicators that small businesses at an all-time high, and they're finally starting to create more jobs. I think we're going to have to wait and see on the tariffs and what happens. This naturally, we are concerned about the potential of a trade war, but this is really a negotiation between our administration and foreign governments. So I think we're going to have to wait and see there.
Yeah.
On the inflation side, I think, I wish I had a crystal ball. The reports that I've been reading today on the jobs report is that, obviously there's always a concern there, especially when the economy is heating up. But that overall, the reports that I've read and saw was that the report was good and the economy is very healthy.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a little bit of doomsday kind of outlook. I think we could do better. Anyway, I'm hopeful that even with the negative prognostications by some, people will continue to focus on what we actually all do best, which is our own personal contribution to the economy, which is whatever work we have dedicated ourselves to, whether we're small business owners or contractors, individuals, employing other people who work for large corporations. All of us have a role to play in creating this scenario that has brought us to this place. And I'm very grateful to the president for pressing forward, even though he's faced, really, it's been just a barrage of negativity to all of his ideas. Yet here we are with these wonderful jobs numbers, and each of those jobs represents a person who was unemployed and is now employed, and they're able to pour some of that back into the economy and into their savings and into their futures. And I really can't emphasize that enough, how important that is to people. Elaine Parker, Chief Communications Officer for Job Creators Network, thank you for joining us today. It's been great to talk to you.
Thanks, Stacey.
All right, talk again soon. So we now have one segment left of this hour, and I think it's going to be fantastic. So if you want to call in, it's 866-963-2037. I'd love to talk to you about any of the subjects we've covered so far, whatever you want to add in, and we'll be right back after this.
Out of all the people in the world, we've all done or will do the following: be birthed into this earth, grow, go to school, maybe go to college, get married, have kids, grow old, and die. Doesn't sound too eventful when put in that perspective. For many, the thought of discipling someone is foreign from the mind and not even on the to-do list. In Matthew chapter 28, verse 19, Jesus tells us to go ye therefore, make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. A disciple is more than a student. He or she is a follower of Jesus Christ. There are a lot of things in this world, but there's nothing like being a Christian. It's a life filled with adventures. Receiving an education, vacationing, marriage, having kids are good, but there's nothing like taking the time to nourish someone in God's word so that they can be a force to be reckoned with. That is priceless. With a heart for the urban family, I'm today's urban woman, Victory McIntosh. Connect with us at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Family is an institution set forth by God, one man and one woman for life, with the outflow being children produced by that union. It's obvious to all that there is an attack on the family in our country, and especially on fathers. Whether it's the cycle of sin that persists in our families or the pressure from our government to exclude men from being intimately involved, the strategic battle is on for the souls of men. Join us in the battle to strengthen fatherhood. UrbanFamilyTalk.com.
Hi, my name is Reggie Rogers, the host of Power Jam's The Wake Up Show. What, y'all?
Don't leave us out, Brother Rogers.
I'm saying. Mother, I wasn't going to do that, but along with me, join the Break Fast Club.
Hey, y'all.
Holla! Ready on the left, Brother Rogers. Amen, Jose. Join us each and every Saturday at 8 o'clock a.m. and again at 8 o'clock p.m. right here on Urban Family Talk.
Power Jams.
The Wake Up Show.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, author and seminar speaker with the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, are we making any progress with a creationist view of the unborn?
Yes, it seems we are, Chris, although there's positive and negative steps being taken. More and more people are being educated on the personhood of the unborn child and the need to protect it. Even efforts to clone humans are helping in the sense that there's much scientific evidence now for the unique personhood of the fertilized egg. Unfortunately, this doesn't always carry the day with legislatures and judges, for they often rule that such a person has no individual rights and can be aborted. We yearn for a day when even the courts go back to Genesis for their thinking.
Thank you, Dr. John.
To learn more about creation, get our free DVD called That's